Hello, I'm Dave Belsky, your host of the Sunset Session, brought to you by FlowerHire. We're here at season 4. We have a special guest, Lance Lambert, CMO of Grove Bags. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having me, man. It's been a minute. We've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think I met you probably 5-6 years ago when I was getting started, and obviously you've been, selling something into the cannabis industry for 10 years now.
Yep.
Oh my God, so many stories. Can't wait to get into it. But I always like to start with you. You have a unique kind of origin story and relationship with the plant. Growing up in Northern California, and talk to me about how cannabis was part of your life. Before we even get into the career side of it.
Yeah, I love that because that's for me, I've always looked at the industry as a community first. And a lot of other industries start that way, right? Real estate, automotive, everything started out as a community before an industry. But this one, the community still really runs the show. They really do make the decisions. And so for me, it was kind of natural. I grew up in Northern California in Marin County, which is just on the other side of the gate of Golden Gate Bridge, home of the Waldos. So for people that know, they were in San Rafael right next door. And, grew up around hippies. I was growing up, born in the late 70s and grew up into the 80s. And it was a really unique time in the Bay Area because it's segueing from hippie to more of a yuppie kind of demographic. But there's always been that strong hippie culture, no matter if it was us going up to see, family and friends in Mendocino or Lake County or Shasta, so it was always around me. But even just the memories of, going boarding with my buddies in Half Moon Bay or Santa Cruz and stop by my buddy's uncle's and, he'd have flower that he just grew that season.
It was just part of life.
Yeah, it was just, and it was never taboo. It was never a stigma. It wasn't really until I moved to the burbs. We moved later elementary school for me. And all of a sudden the DARE program came about. Nixon had his war on drugs before our generation, but here came Reagan, specifically Daryl Gates out of LAPD, who got Nancy Reagan on board with that. And I'm like, what do you mean weed's bad? Like, this doesn't make sense to me. It was just always a part of growing up and a part of the culture. And the people I knew that consumed it, we seemed really easygoing, chill, and friendly. They didn't seem hostile or no domestic disputes. Dangerous. Yeah, it didn't
didn't give you the drug addict vibe. None of that.
Not at all. Yeah. Not at all. So yeah, it was definitely a unique time growing up then. Something I think I've shared with you and a few people know. I've only said it once or twice in an interview, but I actually sold flower in order to save up for college.
You were rich. School. You had cash. Where did you store it?
It was interesting. I like most entrepreneurs, because you're one of them too, so you can relate. Like, I was always doing something. I mean, I had a paper out when I was 11. I was always selling something, candy to kids during our breaks in school or whatever. And it was one of those opportunities. I'm like, man, I need to save up money to go to college. Now, the irony being that I studied criminal justice at school. So everyone's like, how did you end up here? And I'm like, well, better pay and lower risk of being shot. But the cool thing about it was I really learned about, all aspects of legality and obviously criminology and their mentality towards all kinds of obviously narcotics and the rest of it. So
you decided not to be a cop or judge or FBI.
I decided not to.
Were you going to be like a special agent? Were you like, I'm going to be?
I wanted to do public relations. Like, joking aside, I was a resident advisor for the first 2 years, first ever freshman RA at Cal Poly, which was kind of a cool honor. But I was an RA for a few years. I worked for AAA for 4.5 years. So I aligned myself with law enforcement just to learn what their job was all about. And I learned that, nothing against my friends who work for CHP, but we kind of joke around, they're kind of AAA with a gun. They're just out there helping people on the side of the road. I really got attracted to the county sheriffs here in the state because they have special victims unit, they have drug task force, they have public relations, which is what I want to do. Go out and educate, kids about what's right, what's wrong. And so as my concentration was juvenile law, which was fascinating as well. But I took a different path and I have no regrets. I love it,
Yeah.
So it's been great.
Yeah, and so you, in your career, were in media, advertising,
yes.
And we're working in one of the biggest media companies out there, Scripps.
Yes, absolutely loved it. Is a weird way to get into that. So I actually got hit up by them. I was working at the time for a guy, Chip Perry, who started autotrader.com, doing digital media. And the local
based out of Orange
flagship
County, right?
Yes, yeah, exactly. And before the Cox sisters picked them up, who now they have like ADP, Manheim, AutoTrader. But yeah, back in the early years. And so this one guy, he was the business development director for the local Scripps office. And he's like, man, I keep hearing about you, how you're everywhere. My reps keep running into you, how you're a positive guy. You go out, get stuff done. You're always selling. And they swooped me up and wanted me to teach them about digital media. Worked my way up to Scripps Corporate, which is right near your neck of the woods out in East Tennessee. And that's what got me into digital media. And that was back in the Wild West. I mean, that was back when behavioral targeting and demo targeting and geo-targeting, all these cool digital things were coming about, besides just posting a banner up on MySpace.
And they may not have worked yet, but they sounded really cool, right?
Yeah, it sounded really cool. The analytics, I remember doing spreadsheets on Excel to show the results.
Oh, yeah.
It was pretty crazy. There was not, DoubleClick did not have the kind of reporting it does today. And Google wasn't in it, and Amazon wasn't in it. All these guys have exchanges and networks on a whole other level.
But in the world of like digital media buying, being at the genesis of like real programmatic online advertising for one of the biggest companies out there, you found your way in cannabis.
I did.
Professionally. So like the origin story, saving money for college, going into, corporate America, if you will.
Yep.
And then coming out and getting back into cannabis.
It was really, I did not know I would cross paths again with cannabis in my life. I was always supportive. I was always pro-cannabis, albeit, a little bit in the closet about it because of, a little bit of that brainwashing when I was going to college.
You weren't working in that industry.
Yeah.
You guys were having a beer. You weren't smoking a joint. It wasn't socially there.
And the further away I got from the Bay Area, from where I grew up in my roots, the more taboo it was. So that was one thing that was definitely a factor for me. And, it was a little tough. It was tough at first, but definitely made a transition. Excuse me.
No problem. And so you had a mentor who took over the Denver Post more or less, and they're like, I need you out here, and cannabis had just become legal in Colorado, and your first foray into the space was running sales, but eventually operations for the Cannabist, right?
Yeah, it was crazy. I got on as head of operations for obviously their flagship property.
So you end up, being recruited basically to go to Colorado, a place you never lived.
Never lived there. Family is from there, so it's kind of funny. My brother was born there. Parents met married there. Grandparents met married there. So I grew up going there every summer to visit family. Always thought about moving there, but the opportunity came along and made the move. And all of a sudden, while I was out there, they came up with the cannabis, and that's something that good friend Ricardo Bacall started. And I was doing kind of stuff on the back end, and then all of a sudden they need a GM. And I was like, man, this is a good way to kind of combine my childhood with my professional.
Cannabis was groundbreaking. Like, this is, again, a section. Is it a section of the Denver Post, or
It was a standalone site, but it did kind of birth out from underneath the Denver Post. Exactly.
And it was like a groundbreaking what's happening in the forefront of legal cannabis here in Colorado. Exactly.
It was, we covered everything. So it wasn't like High Times or Dope Magazine where it was just kind of more the culture and craft. We covered the good, the bad, the ugly,
So when, at that point, like, really being I'd say one of the, not the first, but one of the first that's selling, advertising into a, online property with a print component. Like, what was it like to sell into the cannabis industry in Colorado in 2014, 2015?
It was interesting because they took a chapter from the alcohol book when they created the rules, established all these. So digital is really tough. You had to prove that 70% or more of your audience was of age, for one, which we were able to do obviously through the stats. But you also had a geo-target. You had to keep within state lines because they were the first adult use state. So you look at the neighbors, Utah wasn't on board at that time. Kansas certainly wasn't. Wyoming wasn't. Utah wasn't. So you really had to geo-target, and that's where the benefits came in for digital advertising for sure.
Wow. And so at that time, you saw, legal cannabis coming of age for the first time in the U.S. from the front lines, talking to the operators, talking to the space. What was it like selling actually into those operators? Like, what were those operators like in 2015 versus if you go now to Colorado in 2023? Like, what's the difference?
Man, it was a Wild West. I mean, that was back in the early days. Companies like Sweetgrass are just starting out, and obviously Dixie and Edipure, Wana, and those are just the edible companies that kind of birthed out and became more of these, many became MSOs. But it was a Wild West. People were still trying to figure it out. They didn't know where they could advertise, what they could advertise. So we were coming in and educating them just as much as we were selling them on the product. And the fact that they didn't understand, we were editorial. Like, again, we weren't, nothing against High Times, and I was friends with Matt Stang at the time, but High Times was very much, again, about the culture, about the craft. Remember, they had centerfolds, which I remember sneaking into 7-Elevens as a kid and checking out those centerfolds in High Times magazine.
Nug shots.
But we covered, it wasn't nug shots. It was a money shot. My friends were looking at certain adult magazines. I'm like, dude, where's High Times?
These purple hairs.
Yeah, but it was cool. And so, but we were covering it. Like if someone claimed they had 10 milligrams, they had 2 milligrams, we were covering that. So some of them were a little standoffish because they're like, we want you to cover this. We want you to talk about that. And we're like, we follow the SPJ code of ethics. And if you talk to Ricardo, because both of us are writers, he's been a writer and he's been a publisher, an editor for years. And so both of us definitely stand by that. Like, we're going to cover the facts and going to be honest about it. So that made it a little more difficult for us because they just thought they could call the shots and, well, hey, I want you to write up a nice article about me and I'll advertise around it. It's like, well, if you have a good product, we'll do that.
Well, that's the right way to do it. So many media plays don't do that, as we know.
Exactly true.
But
True.
The idea of educating the buyer, and if you think about your background, understanding regulation and criminal justice, it served you well to sell into this industry.
It definitely did.
For advertising, for for packaging, whatever it is, in terms of like understanding that variable and be able to speak to that, right? I love that. So, okay, basically, since the Denver Post, you've worked with some great companies and founders, and obviously you're CMO of Grove Bags now, but you've basically been selling advertising as well as tangible ancillary products and services into cannabis companies for a decade.
Yeah.
For a decade. And you still have a smile.
I know,
like you're not
like you're crazy. I've had friends, some really good friends that I have a huge level of respect for. I mean, you're one of those guys. Like, you're a hustler, you're a go-getter, you're always smiling, you get the job done, dude. Every time I see you, you make me smile because you're also good vibes. There's still a lot of us in this industry, but man, there's some that have gotten out, and I feel bad. Like, one of my buddies out in NorCal grew up with, a lot of my friends are in the industry, and he was just like, dude, I can't. He's like, I'm worn out. He's like, because of California, I'm just worn out. Dude. And so he's gone over to fitness and nutrients. He's like, I'll come back when the dust settles. And it's tough. I mean, it really is, because all of us have our highs and lows and ebbs and flows, but it just kind of gets frustrating because you want the next step to come. And for me especially, because unlike many, I always have had a focus on international, because to me it's a global movement, not just a local movement. And I respect where I've come from.
How many countries have you been to for weed? Like, for a weed conference, how many countries have you been to?
It's funny because I just went to my 190th trade show, expo, or event for cannabis last month.
I can't believe you're counting.
Yeah, I am, because I have a little bit of OCD.
I believe it.
It's worked out to, I want to say, 23 countries
23 countries
I've been to.
What country outside the United States are you most excited about in terms of their approach to cannabis?
Oh my gosh. It's a good. I was really impressed by Thailand. I finally went to Thailand. I wrote an art, I write this article series for MG, and I probably cover about 15 countries. And I was very methodical about the ones I chose, because they're ones that not only had a lot of potential that I was excited about to legalize, but I also looked at them from a historical standpoint. So I learned a lot from Thailand. And the funny part is, Thailand was the one that got me the most excited, that I felt most rewarded after, because when you're a writer, that's my creative output. Just like your team in video or visuals, their creative output, it's always been written for me. And so I was so stoked on that one. And then the team over there goes, hey, your best performing article was one on Malta. And I'm like, Malta? I just put that together because that was a hot topic, and everyone's like, oh, Malta's legalizing.
It's in the EU.
Yeah, it's in the EU. It's huge, right? They're doing it before Luxembourg.
Island of what, 40 people?
Yeah, seriously, man, a few 100,000 people, that's it. But Thailand excited me because a lot of people don't know just how much history Thailand has to the culture and craft of cannabis. So let's take it back to, again, before our time, because we're Gen Xers, but the Vietnam War taking place over in South Asia. When the officers would go on leave, obviously leaving Ho Chi Minh Trail, they would head over west and go to the beaches over in Thailand. So they're hanging out in Bangkok and such. They discovered Thai, they discovered the Thai stick, and the USPS was technically one of the first, international drug dealers in the world. These guys were actually shipping Thai stick back to the US, and that's how Thai stick got popular over here back in the. So all their friends that are hippies and out there, hanging out on Hippie Hill in San Francisco, they're getting fed some of this really nice.
No, it makes sense. Why Thailand was the first in Asia. It makes...
It really does. I mean, even the term bong, if you guys, I joke around, I say I'm too old to rip a bong, right? I'm an edibles guy through. I brought you guys some of my flower, but to be honest, like, I only really have time for edibles, and every once in a while I'll consume with good friends, flower. But bong, that terminology came from Thailand. So there's a lot of history tied to it. So when I went out there in January, in there, they call it the land of smiles, and it's so true. Everyone I met, and that's one thing that I found is universal. It's food, music, and cannabis. Anywhere I go, just because I have that network or people know my background, they want to come and show me their cultivar. Like, hey, this is what I grew. Here's all my genetics from Spain. Here's all my genetics from California. I want you to try all of them. I want you, and you never say no when you're a guest, right? So you're going through this roster, but Thailand has a lot of good stuff going on. Now, they did a changing of the guard, their parliament. They have their hierarchy, but they have a parliament.
They have political parties in Thailand too.
Yeah, they definitely do. And the latest political party, they recognize the train left the station. There's just way too, there's several thousand operations that are now under license of either being a cultivar, producer, processor, distributor, retailer, or ancillary, smoke shop, head shop. And you go to any corner in Thailand, you see everything from the Apple store to the hole in the wall, just like here in California. But they are trying to kind of pull it back in a little bit and bring the structure because they deemed it legal. What a lot of people don't understand is there's different levels of legalization. So there's descheduling, which is one step. There's deeming something legal, like Mexico, which said making the plant illegal is actually unconstitutional, which I love that.
Yeah, for the right.
Because why would you, right? You're not using gasoline to turn it into a product like cocaine. It's not opioids, right? So, but there are these different steps. And a good example I use in another country I'll tell you I really love is Portugal. So if the U.S. keeps going the direction it's going to, I've got two places I'll end up. It's either Costa Rica or Portugal. Costa Rica, it's easy, quick flights, and I have a little investment down there, so that's definitely in my back pocket. But Portugal, over a decade ago, they decriminalized all drugs, which is way too radical for the extreme capitalism in our country because there's politics there. But Oregon recently did it, which I applaud them. They decriminalized all drugs, and then they confused a lot of people at the international side, like the WHO and such, because they actually started a medical program for cannabis. And everyone's like, well, if it's descheduled, then why do you need to create that infrastructure? They created the infrastructure for medical cannabis because they needed a way to tax to be able to support those that needed help. Because they recognize that when people are abusing drugs, they're self-medicating, and they're looking for help. So why incarcerate them and teach them to do bad things when they're just trying to better themselves or trying to fix a problem they have?
It wasn't so they could be the massive exporter to the rest of the EU. It wasn't.
No, Portugal. It's really, you'd be surprised. It's more southern Spain that actually is a big supplier. And the thing that happened there was the mayor of Amsterdam, unfortunately for the last 4 years, she's been wreaking havoc. She's trying to clean up the city and trying to clean up Holland in general. But what she did with cutting off the local tail is opened up the mafia bringing in the illegal substance, obviously from Spain, and that is suffering, their GDP because of the fact that all of a sudden this money is going to a neighboring country. So you're right. Yes, Spain definitely. A lot of people don't know Spain supplies a lot of underground flower to the rest of the EU.
They got the climate benefit.
Yeah. They do. Oh my gosh,
yeah.
From a latitude, because I want to grow when I retire. It's fun. I love hooking up friends and such. So
you
notice the places I'm looking at do have the perfect climate for it sure.
All right, so selling into the U.S. cannabis industry, like I know we talk about this. Every state feels different, but like selling into like an MSO that's public versus like a single shop, or two shops in Missouri. Like, what's the difference? What's better? Like, is it the same? Like, how do you classify the SMB buyer from like the mid-market to the enterprise buyer in your head?
That's an excellent question. As a marketer, that's a challenge for us in this space because especially people would think, oh, you have it easy, Lance, you're just targeting B2B and not consumer. Well, that's incorrect, and that's been incorrect in most of the positions I've been in. To your point, rather it be media, running media for weed maps or for the cannabis, or on the ancillary side. It's always been that I've been going after both audiences, but the B2B to segment is a challenge in itself. You're right, because the conversation with the SMB, or let's just say the craft grower, friends back home in NorCal, when I go to visit them and explain to them that there's life beyond glass jars and turkey bags, right? They're like, oh, you're just trying to promote that because that's a company you're with. It's like, no, dude, first off, I don't sell anything that I don't believe in. If I don't believe in it or if I've lost that belief in it, then I self-terminate. I move on. I go to somewhere I believe in and someone that I believe in as far as the individual I work for. So I explained to them, no, first off, glass has a far higher carbon footprint. when it's produced has a far higher carbon footprint when it's recycled. Plastic is not all throwaway. It's not your mom's sandwich bag from school. This is something that you can upcycle and use time and time again. And the fact that it has attributes that are beneficial to this plant doesn't allow in UV like glass does or turkey bags. It doesn't allow in air like glass or turkey bags do. Isn't porous like glass or turkey bags are. So it's stuff like that where you're educating, but it's a totally different conversation, your point, with a large scale. Let's say, we'll pick on LPs, right? There's 250 plus LPs up in Canada. A lot of them are those large scale, several thousand employees, publicly traded. You're dealing with an individual that's on procurement or product sourcing that knows nothing about the plant. So it is a different conversation because you're having to educate them on the benefits, or the FABs, right? I call it the features, advantages, and benefits, not just features and benefits. So I'm explaining the FABs and the USPs to them in a certain language while saying it completely different to the actual operator or the grower.
To the wholesale grower, small in freaking Pennsylvania. It's a whole different...
That they're just like, dude, how can you save me time?
You're speaking the language of the flower in one.
Yeah.
So you're a chameleon. You have to be a chameleon.
You really do. You do. And in this space, and you get this too, because I see it with you, if you can't wear multiple hats, you really should not be in the cannabis industry. No. And I'm not being mean, because you and me, I'm more welcoming.
Don't expect people to acquiesce to you.
No.
And your expectations of them from a decorum perspective. You have to come to them.
Yes,
and
exactly.
be ready
true.
to meet them.
Yep, exactly true.
Whether to do anything, not just sell something, but just to have a conversation, do business with.
Yeah.
There's an ecosystem. Most people don't understand the essential nature of an ecosystem to cannabis. When you're on the ancillary side, you totally freaking get it, because you see you're one part of a whole web of ancillary businesses that form an ecosystem around each individual state or national ecosystem, right?
Very true.
So is the best tell for a potential customer, is it like opening up licenses? Is it, expanding into new states? Is it raising money? Like, what is your tell to be like, this is my ideal prospect for the next 90 days on that list that I'm personally spending my own personal capital to try to get in front of? Like, what is your tell?
The ideal candidate, to your point, is an individual that's open to learn. That's one thing that's a challenge, and a lot of people, they get frustrated. I know you've heard this. A lot of people in this industry get frustrated. They want to do business in California. They know, I'd say all in, we're probably 45 million people in this state, larger than many countries, including Canada, which is the second largest land mass in the world. This is a tough nut to crack because they don't speak the language. So you would think that, I've got the product, I've got the solution in the ancillary side. Of course, the guys who drink the Kool-Aid are the ones who know the product best. Wrong. Opposite. The ones who actually are the most open-minded and apt to learning new things and new secrets and tricks to be more efficient are the novice. The ones, and again, going to places like Thailand, going to places I never fathomed like Israel or Jamaica or Australia, where they want to learn, and they want to learn from someone who comes from this space, who comes from California, who grows himself. So I'm not just saying off a hypothetical. They're the ones that are open-minded because they're like, I know this is the way it's been done, but is there a better way? Is there a way that makes it easier, that makes it more efficient, that saves me time, saves me money?
Ask the question, and people in cannabis will share their insights. That's the community thing you were talking about.
Yes, exactly.
Like everyone's against the fucking man. It's still a Schedule 1, and everyone's overtaxed and overburdened, and just trying to make the world a better place through plant-based wellness.
Yep.
At least the right people are. United States, state by state, most surprising cannabis culture to you, where you're like, I didn't think I was going to find my people here, but I found my people.
Well, it's a region, but I can call out one state. That would be the South. Okay, so...
Are you talking Arkansas?
No, I'm talking Georgia,
Louisiana?
Alabama, Tennessee. I'm not deep South, but Georgia, Alabama, Tennessee, they have stereotypes of us. We have stereotypes of them. I've been going there for years, for when I was with Scripps. I'd fly out at least 2-3 times a year for corporate meetings before moving there. So I knew what I was getting into. One of the first questions people ask is where I moved from. And they'd say, I've been to San Diego. And I'm like, there's more to California than just San Diego. That's actually on one end.
Or they've never been, but formed very strong opinions about why they will never go.
Yes, exactly true. Then there's those. But the thing they said was, it must be a culture shock. And I'm like, well, yes and no. I mean, I knew what I was coming out to. I know you guys are laid back, easy going. I wasn't quite ready for the what church do you go as being the first question. That was very unique. But what did surprise me is, I guess a little bit of the generalization I had was I knew the white lightning game was strong, in the South. And sure enough, people I work with even at Scripps. I mean, one guy is like, I think his uncle worked for Northrop or something. So he had like this full on stainless steel, next level still that he put up in his shop. I mean, it looked like something you would see out of like Stone Brewery out here, right? Just full next level operation. So they're legit. But I was surprised about the flower scene. And I did my homework and found out that Tennessee oftentimes was between like 6th and 8th place on one of the most popular places to produce illicit cannabis in the country. And I had no idea.
I mean,
so
Tennessee grows more hemp than I remember like 2 or 3 states.
Oh yeah.
And you know, I moved to Nashville a little over a year ago, and I was surprised by the plant-based wellness community there. First off, even though there's no medical THC program, Georgia's now getting it's going right now, and
Kentucky's coming
Kentucky's
around.
coming
They're
around.
big growth,
Alabama's started. Mississippi started. But there's you can buy Delta 8 hemp-derived things everywhere.
Yes,
literally everywhere, and it's satisfying a similar need without the same quality of product or testing or whatever. But there's I thought when I moved there, I was going to be very upfront what I did. So if they're going to write me
I am
off,
too. I've been out of green closet for years.
But people are like, they never met anyone like it, but they're all users.
Yeah.
They all use the plant in some way, whether it's an edible or a gummy or a Delta 8
topical ointment on their knees.
It's everywhere.
Yeah. And that's the Carolinas are kind of smart too. They've got their game. They aren't getting into it. They're kind of tippy-toeing North Carolina is, but they play the whole THC. And it's like, oh, okay, well, it's legal until you incinerate, until you heat it up, and all of a sudden you decarb it, and it's exactly what you want. So there's some states that are playing it really smart, which is interesting, and they're doing the slow play. But then, like we've discussed before, it always surprised me, so California, my home state, I'll always love it. I don't love what it's turned into, but I always love historically what it is. And a lot of people don't know, I mean, we had legal cannabis in the Bay Area since 1990. We had Prop P in 1990, which was the first ever legal market, which is a city and county of San Francisco. That's thanks to Dennis Perone and Brownie Mary supporting the HIV and supporting, obviously, what everyone was going through with that. It helped with sleep and eating disorder and all the things that were associated with the medicine. So we had it since 1990, and then obviously 215 and 96. And so we were years ahead of the rest of the country, but really when Colorado came on is when it went to that next level. But as we've discussed, it was really surprising because Colorado came on and I was there. And all of a sudden Washington and Oregon, and they weren't taking notes from what Colorado did right or wrong, And so Oregon, which I love, and if I stay domestic, that's probably where I will retire because it reminds me of most of Northern California. And honestly, the Emerald Triangle makes it almost a Grants Pass as far as the topography and everything else and growing. So probably where I'll go. But Oregon did their limitless license game, which is really uncool because that's short-sightedness by the government, right? They said, hey, all of you can get licenses, all of you can get permits, strongest survive, extreme capitalism, right? So they're getting that big money grab in the beginning, but they're opening up the opportunity for illicit, and they're opening the opportunity for people to obviously not survive and die and invest all this money for nothing. Oklahoma comes along years later. It's like
even more so.
Didn't even pay attention. And all of a sudden you had, I won't say which
$1,000 you can open up a dispensary.
It's insane. And that's when all of a sudden people were surprised when the price per pound dropped here and all of a sudden we stopped sending packs to the East Coast. It's like, guys, someone just put a wedge in the middle of the country. And that wedge is filling all those orders on the East Coast. And they're growing it for cheaper, they're growing it easier, and it's obviously to traffic it halfway across country versus all the way across country.
There was something Oklahoma grows 70 times more cannabis than it could consume in its medical program.
Yeah, I believe it.
70 times.
So they're finally, I was just out there for, I won't say which trade show, it didn't go that well. It's definitely up, that market's in a hard reset and it's sad. But I was out there right when they went through updating the regs, and now licenses are anywhere from 25 to 50K. So they've come around, but the market got saturated, the market got messed up. I mean, a lot of stuff went on in this past several years since they went on legal. So I don't think any state has done it perfect. Like you've asked me before, like, I don't know who's doing it. I like what Colorado's done as far as grants and scholarships for any child. Pueblo High School is a good example. It didn't matter what your GPA, your ethnicity, your religion, et cetera. If you're going on to continuation junior college, 4-year college, then you had a scholarship waiting for you because of the cannabis taxes, right? Or the Section 8 housing that they're doing. Like they're doing so many things to give back to the community, and that's money that otherwise would have gone to the cartels on the other side of the border. And so that's something that I definitely have to applaud. And you and I both feel the same way. I'm always an advocate. I'm not an activist because I lead with education, not with the closed fist forcing my ideologies on anyone. But having said that, if it takes saying, hey, what are the financial or fiscal gains to legalization in order to move a state or a market or a country in the right direction, then I'm okay having that conversation too. But really deep down, again, like you, I always have looked at it as a medicine. As a cancer survivor, I'll forever look at it as a medicine, along with all the other Eastern and holistic medicines I take. So it's definitely a benefit, but it's tough because I don't think one state's gotten it perfect yet.
No,
you know?
No, and you're right. They're still not really learning from each other. Missouri had a smooth rollout, you know, and we'll see if it has the prices drop there and when that shock comes, right?
Yeah.
So this is my own terminology for the last 10 years of cannabis. You have the early days of legal cannabis, 2015 to 2017, 2018 to 2019, bubble one.
Yeah.
Right. MedMen public, Green GTI public.
The unicorn.
Bubble one. Oh my God! Just get as many licenses as you can. Make money later. Fuck it.
Turn and burn it. Yeah.
And then there was a reckoning coming, right? But then COVID happened. World changed. Essential service. Bubble two.
Oh my gosh.
Bubble two.
That one was reminiscent of the .com bomb that went off in the 2000s. Man,
I mean, I would right now. I would take Q1 of 2021.
The
in terms
money.
of what was going on?
I won't say which company, but a company that I knew very well that went from $10 million to $21 million. Why? And that was just your point, being deemed essential.
Yeah.
And we talk about, man, that's when you know you're an OG, because we talk about this evolution phase of the industry. And you're spot on with mine. I tell people, I said, hey, that first wave. I remember going to events, you probably do too, like the Emerald Exchange. Michael Katz loved his events because he brought the community and the culture of Northern California of what I grew up with to the Santa Monica Mountains. And yeah, you get Trustafarians and hipsters up from Malibu, all the kids off the Kardashian shows and videos, but you still had like that energy and that vibe. And I remember guys, either from Redwood or Prairie or Spire Rock, they'd literally be walking up like, Lance, you got to check this season out. And they give me a fistful of flour. Literally, that's when I wish I worked for Grove Bags, because then I have all the free bags. But that was like the first, to your point. And then I agree, 2018, I always watched it, especially when Jeff Sessions was in office. There was always a cannon shot over the bow in January. I don't know if you ever noticed it, but it's like we got so far along, and by the time MJ Biz came around, the big party, everyone's all celebrating, and then something inevitably would come from the federal government that would all of a sudden put us in check, right? It's all of a sudden we just got toe checked and we'd kind of step back. 2018, something weird happened where it hit in the middle of 2018, it hit the summer of 2018, and all the funding money pulled out. All the investors are like, it's not happening quick enough. This isn't like real estate. This isn't like .com. We don't want to be patient. We don't want to wait. We don't know what's going on. So to your point, all of a sudden 2018 was like this whole next chapter. But then, like you said, COVID came in, and it's almost like knowing a gambler. The smart ones know to pocket the money here that they invested, pocket the money here that they profited, and then whatever additional they made, they keep investing over here. But there are a lot of people that just, if I'm making more, I'm spending more, and they didn't realize that was an artificial inflation, to your point. Because 2018, 2019, we were starting to come on, and then you have this artificial bump, and everyone thought, here's the real heyday, and then it came back to reality. And that's hitting a lot of companies.
What are we in now? What's the period? Is it called the fuckening? What is the period?
Oh my God! Now it's reality, man. It's the strong survive right now. And I feel, Herbal to see that. They're a huge distro. They were
$700 million in top line products distributed to the state of California. Roughly.
They were the big guys, and look at it. It shows that nobody necessarily is bulletproof yet in this space, because it is so. And you hate saying it because we've said it for a decade. But it is such at an infancy state. But the reason being is because we're held under thumb because of politics until that federal legalization comes.
Yeah.
And part of me, this is one of the articles I wrote about people always hypocritical of the big three, that mean pharma, alcohol, tobacco. And I was like, you guys, pharmaceutical has been in the game since 16. Alcohol has been in the game since 17, 18. Tobacco's they've owned fields since 15, 14. Like, those guys have been around. But everything needs to get aligned so that the right people are making the money at the top, at the federal level, before they move it forward. Because when you have 85% of the populace that are pro-cannabis on some level or another, right? Medical, adult use, both, whatever.
Not be a Schedule I
it should not. But that's when again, unfortunately, extreme capitalism. But it's a tough time, man. It is definitely a reckoning, and the people who are doing it right. Another article I was just on the phone with Kathy Brewer, with the editor over there yesterday. And I just wrote an article comparing California to the Canadian market. And everyone's like, what do these two markets have in common? I'm like, what don't they have in common? So Canada was a medical market for years before it was an adult use market, right? Same with California. They kind of rushed into it. I applaud them for doing a 1.0, 2.0, right? They did a flower-only phase, October 17th, 2018. We'll wait until the year anniversary before we bring concentrates. And even then, it'll be optional at a provincial government level, right? By province to province. And so they rolled it out progressively. But even then, the whole approach they took forced people to still go to the local dealer. They still said, I don't want to pay 70 Canadian to get this. I don't care if the Royal Post is delivering it to my door. It takes 2 weeks. It's boofy as hell because it's too dry and it's coming in a medicine bottle. And I can get it a lot quicker and in many instances a lot better from my local dealer. So they were going through the same thing we were here. And what's happening up there was actually up in Vegas. And this was bittersweet, man. My last international show I did before COVID hit, I was supposed to go to Cannabis. I canceled because it didn't feel right. I had friends calling from Asia and Europe and they're like, dude, this is real. So the last international show I actually went to before COVID hit on these shores was in Vancouver, was Lift & Co. It was a good show. So it's kind of bittersweet. I went to that show the beginning of this year. So right, whatever, 2-3 years later. And going into that show, one of the guys who represents the craft growers, which for the record is 200 less employees. That's a lot different than the California market. But he pointed out that 70+% of the flower that was produced and sold in Canada when it legalized back in 2018 was coming from the LPs. And you guys know all the names. Canopy, Tilray, you saw latest news about Canopy, I'm sure. Canopy, Tilray, Tweed, San Rafael, et cetera, right? Now, 70% plus comes from the craft growers. And it's because the consumers are voting with their wallet. So you can say, oh, they don't really know what they want. They don't really know what they need. But you can bet that the consumers are going to get their way sooner or later. And that's exactly what's happening in Canada. I think that's what's happening in California, man. Going to the Emerald Cup, which Tim and Taylor, have been moving that around a bit, but they got it right. They did it up in Richmond, right on the water this year. It was phenomenal. A lot of old heads like myself hanging out, but a lot of the young G's in there. A lot of the indoor kind of trappy guys, a lot of the outdoor generational guys all in the room. One guy made a comment that stood out to me, and he is a winner, one of many, but he's a winner of outdoor. And he's like, and for all you investors out there that got money, invest in us. Like, what a novel concept. Don't bring in, these hired guns from mainstream ag or from large corporations. Bring in the guys who have been doing it and put your money on the horse that's won. And I think that's going to be a movement. And I don't mean to pick on California because this is where we are, but California oftentimes does set the trend for the country. It does with automotive emissions.
Getting educated. The consumer's smarter than people think they are in cannabis, and they
absolutely.
Yeah, I want whole plant organic. I want in all of the molecules in my edible. I don't just want a disty edible.
Yep.
Once they understand what it is, it just takes time, right?
Yep.
But people want the craft grow experience. Now, there's always going to be a market for people that just want something cheap and effective.
Oh yeah.
But if preference, would I have this beautiful sun-grown outdoor and I can hear the farmer's fucking story, or do I want something in a 1 million square foot greenhouse?
You're spot on, man. And we don't like to, I always say this, I preface it, while we don't like to compare this community, this industry to alcohol, again, there's similarities that you can't ignore. They're the two that have gone through prohibition in this country, and we saw what happened with alcohol over time. You have a micro-macro path. To your point, there's always going to be the people that want to drink the Diet Coors or Bud Light or whatever, but there's always going to be guys that are like, I want that real craft beer that I can thoroughly enjoy, and it's 2 or 3 drinks versus a 12-pack at the lake, and maybe I'll get a buzz and have to pee 5 times before I get off the boat, right? So I agree, it's the same path. And you do have the Walmarts of weed. We won't say who they are, but there was one in Colorado, and I'm like, man, it was so obvious. They're selling $80 ounces, and they're boof, but they're for the guys who just blaze an ounce a day. But the guys who really want the craft, hey, I'm hitting up 14ers because 14ers they've got the gold, they've got what I want, and I don't need to blaze a quarter ounce to get high. I can blaze off an eighth and be absolutely golden for the next day or two, So it is going that direction, and you're right, the consumer's smart, and who helps it is this whole movement towards back to the earth and holistic, right? Man-made or Mother Nature. Mother Nature's got the answer, So
cannabis is coming of age, at an interesting time in a lot of reasons right now.
Definitely agree.
I got to ask you a hiring question. So when you're building out your team,
yes,
at Grove Bags or wherever else, what are you looking for? Are you looking to hire anyone right now?
That's a great question. So we actually are. We've got some phenomenal candidates. We're looking for someone to help out on the West Coast. Normally we wouldn't have as high expectations or stipulations around people that are familiar with the plant or the community. But the West Coast, again, is one of those places where it really helps for you to be able to speak to the craft and the culture. It's okay for people who come with skills from other categories to a market like the Northeast or the East Coast. But again, we need someone that's more than just like, oh, I'm a cannabis expert because I've been smoking since I was 14. Like I've heard that from industry experts.
That can sell into the back end of the California industry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where you're not talking about selling a brand into retail, which has its own challenges for sure.
Exactly.
You're talking about the growers and processors in California.
Yeah. And they can smell. And again, I don't mean, it's Oregon and a huge, one of my best friends growing up, he runs Sugar Tree Farms up there, phenomenal grower. He nothing gets past him. Same with a gal that used to work for me at Weed Maps, runs TKO Reserve. Her and her husband put out absolute fire. But you get that in Washington. You even get that up in BC. You get that same culture and craft that's unlike any other part of their country as well. So we are looking for that person. We're also looking for customer service. Someone help us with customer service. We're based out of Cleveland, Ohio, so preferably out of the Midwest. But customer service is king. Like that's, again, a lot of people come in and you can't churn and burn and just smell the sale and move on to the next. Like you really have to be in it, and it's a relationship. And I was into consultative selling before it was cool, because I understood that if you're successful, I'm successcul. This should be cyclical.
Right. If you're successful with this experience, you're going to promote it to everybody that
Exactly.
that you know.
And nobody trusts a marketer. I know I'm a persuasive guy. I'm personable. I'm really friendly. I hear I'm easy to work with. That's awesome. But I don't expect you to believe me. Why would you believe me? I work for a company. But they believe you. If you're like, hey, you know what? I used to use glass jars before too, but I discovered this bag that not only cures my bud, but it can keep it fresh for a year without having to flush it with, any noble gas.
Bullshit.
That kind of, yeah. So it's that kind of thing where we really want to be on top of our customer service because there's so many advocates out there. And that's why I tell people, I'm like, did Apple ever contact you and tell you, hey, this phone's a shit? Put down that BlackBerry, dude. This new smartphone is the bomb. No, your best friend who's a full-on geek told you about that. He crossed the chasm. He drank the Kool-Aid. He understood all the features, advantages, benefits of Apple, and he got you to buy it too. It was never Apple that sold you on it. It was your friend. And so that's what we have to look at as marketers and make sure everyone on the team gets that as well,
So what's the one thing for the rest of 2023? We're halfway through the year. Holy shit.
It's insane.
What is going on? What are you thinking most excited about the second half of the year?
Oh my gosh, second half, there's things, a little bit of Phoenix. I think there's going to be some coming out of the ashes here. I really do. I think that
it's got to happen eventually, man.
It really does
for a while.
Man. It does, yeah. We're in a bit of a hard reset, as I say. So just like when you have to do it to your computer, it takes a minute. You see the black screen, you get a little worried, but then all of a sudden you see it come back to life. Everything's okay. It's tough because it's darkest before dawn. I know I'm using a lot of cliches here, but it really is, man. It's kind of dark right now for a lot of companies, but that is the strongest survive scenario. And I think it is going to push out some of the people that don't belong, because that's one thing I've learned being a part of this community is people won't say it to your face, hey, you're an asshole. You don't belong in this space. You're just trying to get rich. You're in it for the wrong reasons. You don't even believe in the plant. You don't even believe in the health attributes to it. Nobody says that, but it's kind of like that kid in dodgeball that nobody really picks. Like it's kind of that they kind of get pushed out. And it's the same way in this space. It's like you're kind of treated like a splinter with your body. Eventually you'll get pushed out. That's what's happening right now. Some of the people that we don't want to see go, unfortunately, are moving on. But there's a lot of people that, just really, do they belong here in the first place, or were they in for the right reasons? That I think are going, oh, this is hard. This is tough. You really have to be passionate about it to survive here. And you do. So.
But the Phoenix, the fact that you say there'll be a little bit of a Phoenix the rest of this year, I love that optimism. The fact that you say that, let's go.
Yes.
Thank you, Lance. Thanks for coming in today.
Always, man. It was a pleasure.